Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar, 4 Ways to Get More for Your EdTech Dollars. We are so excited to have Charles Duarte here presenting. Charles is Vice President at Diamond Assets, where he works with schools to maximize the residual value of their Apple devices. He's taught grades 1, 2, 4, 5, and 6, and has implemented 2 different one-to-one digital learning initiatives while serving in a variety of district leadership roles. Charles can be reached at any time at charles@diamondassets.com. Let's take a look at today's agenda. For those who are new on the call, we'll be doing a quick overview of Jamf and Diamond Assets, followed by a walkthrough of the biggest challenges K-12 schools face when exploring new technology. Charles will discuss 4 concrete ways to get more for your budget, and we'll wrap up with next steps and questions. If you have questions throughout the presentation today, please enter them into the Q&A section of the webinar console. We'll start here with a quick overview of Jamf. So for those who are not familiar with Jamf, we help organizations succeed with Apple. With a focus on end-user empowerment, Jamf automates common IT tasks and gives users the ability to set up and support their own Apple devices. We focus on the areas of zero-touch deployment, robust device configuration, app management, inventory, security, and for that end-user empowerment, the ability to offer a self-service app catalog for end users. Jamf is all about embracing the native Apple technology experience consumers have come to know and love, and we have offered 0-day support for all Apple releases for over a decade, supporting new operating systems and features from Apple the day they're available. And now I will pass it over to today's presenter, Charles, to talk a bit about the biggest challenges in K-12 education today as it relates to education technology. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Jen. Hey, everybody. Excited to spend some time with you here today as we take a look at the challenges that schools face. Oftentimes there's a perception that, there's a lot of time needed for large projects, and we're often faced with executing projects with limited resources. And there's some ways that you can change your perspective on that if you take advantage of all that there is to offer when it comes to the Apple deployment tools and using a robust MDM like Jamf to make sure that you can get everything out on time. And where we come in with that is helping you with all of your current inventory to make sure that we can help you manage that and pull that out of your current environment. So the question often comes up, what makes learning with technology sustainable? And by definition, we see here that sustainable means able to be maintained at a certain rate or level. Now, I really want to focus in on the words rate and level, because as we think about what technology is able to do in our classrooms, we have to make sure that we have the latest and greatest products available to our students and staff, and we want to make sure that they're able to operate at a level where they can have the latest version of iOS and take advantage of all of the latest software features that Apple has to offer. Traditionally, as we take a look at the technology lifecycle mindset, there really wasn't an option other than to throw away your existing technology. And we know that that's bad for the environment and really wasn't a great option based on the sustainability that we want for our planet. Now, we have transitioned over time into an e-waste mindset where we had recycling companies who would come in and take all of our product and responsibly recycle that for us. But in the evolution here, moving forward from this traditional mindset, we can move from e-waste and into e-value. And what that means is, with the products that you have currently in your education environment, oftentimes there's a lot of residual value that you can take advantage of and also provide users a new experience with the latest hardware and software. Now, here's a key question. What drives your technology decisions for learning? And oftentimes when I ask this question of district administrators, the first response is cost. Now, it would be my hope that the driver in terms of those decisions has to do with the user experience and making sure that we're educating our kids and supporting our staff in the best ways possible, but cost often comes to the forefront. So as we take a look at cost and value, oftentimes cost comes first, when in fact we should be taking a look at value on the forefront to make sure that the acquisition that we're making or the investment we're making is really going to do all that we want it to do for our students and staff. So here we go. Tip number 1, identifying your equity position. Now, at Diamond Assets, we're able to help you identify your equity position based on your current fleet of equipment, and I'll go over that in just a few moments. So with determining value, we want to take a look at the inventory of your existing fleet. So keeping track of what devices you have in your fleet management is really critical to understand what value exists out there among your users. Taking a look at determining device equity, we're seeing a lot of school districts shift from their annual spend in buying devices based on the time that they've come out and unifying on one type of device to make sure that management is much easier for IT teams and IT staff, and also that students and staff have a similar experience across the organization. Another key tip here is don't keep your devices on hand too long. The days of using devices until they die really is no longer a benefit whatsoever, especially when it comes to exploring financing models. And then also to maintain up-to-date hardware and software. And it's difficult to maintain up-to-date hardware and software if you're not on a steady cycle of financial sustainability. So a little bit about Diamond Assets and our process. It really begins with requesting a quote, and from there we're able to identify what your equity position is in your equipment. From there, we schedule the pickup where we're going to send in our Diamond Assets badged employees. These are our asset recovery specialists who come in to package everything up for you, palletize it, and ship it to our processing center. From there, we process and produce a reconciliation report. And this process includes checking devices for activation lock, taking a look to see if devices are still in Apple's device enrollment program, cleaning the devices, removing asset tags, removing engravings to make sure that as these devices get passed on to the secondary market, that there's no connection back to you and your school district. And finally, producing a reconciliation report, which will have the serial number, make and model, storage, and grading notes, along with the total value of your lot of equipment. And from there, you collect payment from us. And we issue payment to you so you can take those funds and bring down the cost of your next acquisition of Apple hardware. So one of the ways that we categorize equipment is by taking a look at our grading scale. And you can see grade A equipment here is valued at 100%. Grade B equipment, based on the conditions listed below, is 85%. Grade C is at 75%, grade D at 50%, and grade F at 10%. So oftentimes, as I'm talking with school districts and working with district administration, the question of initial cost comes up. And so as we take a look at this chart, which we've published in a number of different varieties, you take a look at the initial acquisition cost of an iPad in 10-pack pricing currently at $294. You take a look at your average Chromebook price, and it's currently sitting at about $249. Now, if you follow the graph over to the 2-year estimate, we're taking a look at the iPad 6th Gen in 2 years being worth $125 compared to that of a standard Chromebook at $10. You move on to year 3, and we see a $100 return for that iPad and $5 for that Chromebook. And at 4 years, the iPad is still carrying $80 worth of value, where the Chromebook is carrying nothing at that point. So the second tip is knowing your financing options. So as you consider financing versus a capital purchase, this is going to do a number of things for you in making sure that you maintain sustainability through the cycle of technology acquisition. So why finance? What this does for us is it provides a smaller predictable expense year over year. It allows you to get more devices for the same cost, and it provides for a much more equitable learning environment. Now, this is critical as we consider the user experience of our students and staff, and making sure that it's not fragmented based on when a device was introduced and based on the timing of the purchase of that device from the district. From an operational expenses standpoint, what this is going to demonstrate through financing is, first and foremost, a commitment to your program, making sure that you're in this for the long haul and that you are considering not just your initial technology acquisition, but looking 3, 4, 6, 8 years down the road. You're working with established funding, so it makes it much easier year over year to make that payment versus having to go back to your school board at the end of a 3 or 4 year term and ask for the total amount to purchase all new devices. It allows for a utilities-focused structure. So no different than paying for your electricity. Think of your technology costs as a year-over-year expense that you're going to incur either way. It increases your buying power when you're buying in bulk. And again, the equitable experience is critical for all users. Flexible schedules are one thing that we'll address here in just a few moments, but The key here is flexibility and understanding what you can do to get your existing fleet out of your out of your environment so that you can take advantage of taking those residual dollars and putting them toward your new purchase. So one example I'd like to call out is if we take a look at 1,000 iPad 6th Gen units, where the current hardware cost in 10-pack pricing is $294, and we take a look at a 3-year financing cost per year. And that cost per year is going to be $98,000 with a simple breakdown of 3 segments of that $294,000. If we take a look at the residual value that's forecasted after year 2 for those 6th Gen iPads, you're looking at about $125,000 at grade A pricing. Now, if we factor our company's historic average return of 80% of that grade A value, you're looking at an 80% return of $100,000. What this tells us is that after 2 years, you're actually in a strong enough equity position that you can pay off the 3rd year of that lease and move into new product. And the reason that that's important for you to understand is that you don't necessarily have to take the entire financing component to term. You're typically in a strong enough equity position sooner than taking that to the complete term that's identified there. Now, this also works in a 4-year lease structure, where typically after 3 years, you're in a strong enough equity position to move into new product by paying off that 4th year lease payment. So tip number 3, timing is really everything. So a few things that I want to talk about is when to refresh. Now, the typical school district is looking at a summer timeframe to refresh their equipment. And it makes a lot of sense. Students are gone, they've got a lot of extra time, they're building it into other projects that they have going on at that point in time. But something that happens is the secondary market becomes flooded, and it impacts supply and demand, which also impacts pricing and what secondary consumers are willing to pay for devices based on all the options that are out there. So we'd really encourage you to take a look at a non-summer time frame for your trade to make sure that you're capitalizing on the most residual value you can possibly get. So a couple of tips here. Make sure that you consider refreshing during breaks. So taking a look at maybe a Thanksgiving break or a winter break or a spring break when students aren't on campus, and IT teams typically have some additional time to work into these elements to make these refreshes happen. Another key piece is to work with a quality trade-up partner. Work with a company that has a solid reputation, is known for paying its bills and taking care of its customers year over year. Another consideration is looking at the fall time frame. So with summer being a challenge with the flooded market, take a look at fall. And although it seems like an off time to refresh your equipment, even with students in-house, with the deployment programs that exist and using Jamf as an MDM with zero-touch deployment, there are really a ton of options available for you. So moving ahead here, this is a sample from one of our infographics and also a document that we recently co-marketed with Jamf to take a look at some of the values that you can take advantage of when not waiting until a summer refresh. I think the numbers here give you a sense of if you were to refresh over the winter time frame, then you'd be taking a look at saving about $250,000. And to equate that to how many new devices that would be, it'd be roughly 850 new iPad devices. So in tip number 4, we take a look at flexible scheduling. And flexible scheduling is something that's really critical for you to know, especially if you're looking at avoiding that typical summer refresh. So if we take a look at interval refreshes, which is really what flexible scheduling is, the key steps here are to, first and foremost, acquire your new product. And the way that you're going to want to do that is by setting up a lease with Apple to make sure that you can get all of your product in-house. Now, where the flexible scheduling option comes in is you bring in all of your new product, and you're going to be making that lease payment year over year, so you're not having to incur that capital outlay on the front end. With the flexible scheduling option, you're going to be able to deploy a segment of your new devices while simultaneously collecting the existing equipment that's in the hands of students and staff, and then you schedule a pickup with us. And then you're going to repeat that process anywhere from 3 to 4 to even 5 times. What that does for you is it takes into account depreciation over time of those fixed assets. It allows you to capitalize on the value that exists at that moment in time. It also allows for much more flexibility on the part of IT staff because they're not having to implement all of the devices in your entire fleet all at once. So you can really move at your own pace to make all of this work seamlessly. So as we take a look, we want to recap on what we've covered. And I know we've covered a lot in the last 15 minutes, but that'll leave us some time for Q&A at the end. So in order to get more for your EdTech dollars, first of all, you want to identify value. And that's something that we help school districts with day in, day out, every single day. You want to make sure that you're exploring your financing options and taking a look at the buying power that you have and taking a look at moving into a more sustainable cycle in that 3 to 4 year time frame. Consider timing, because timing really is everything in capitalizing on your value and pulling your existing fleet out so you can get all of those new machines in there. And then considering flex scheduling. A refresh doesn't have to be done all at once when it comes to the buyback process, but it's much more beneficial if you're able to get all of your new Apple product at once so that you can time it out in a way that's going to best suit your team, your resources, and your time. So one last bit about Diamond Assets from start to finish. You can request a quote from us at any time by reaching out to us at our website, diamond-assets.com. We'll help you with scheduling a pickup. We'll pick up all of your equipment, bring it in, process it, clean it, reconcile it, and then we'll issue payment to you in a seamless fashion.
Great. Thanks, Charles. And then as a recap on Jamf, we help more than 13,000 organizations manage more than 9 million Apple devices. We serve key markets such as the top tech companies, Fortune 500 companies, most valuable brands, top marketing groups, and over 6,000 schools. We have deep roots in education, which is why we're super excited to have a company like Diamond Assets here today with this presentation as we work very closely together to ensure that your existing devices are off-boarded and your new devices are onboarded. And Charles, I don't know if you want to speak to that partnership a little bit more.
Absolutely. It's been a joy to work with Jamf, considering that we have a very similar customer base and combining our resources to produce documents like our focus document on avoiding summer refreshes and timing your refresh appropriately. I think we've been able to reach a lot of individuals and help people understand what the possibilities are when it comes to deploying.
Great. Thank you for joining today's webinar. Now we'll take some time for questions. So, Charles, I'm looking here at a couple questions. Looks like someone asked, what do I do if I have devices that are broken or don't even turn on?
That's a fantastic question. The best answer is please send them in to us. We can certainly help for that. You know, in our grading scale and the way we approach our business, those would qualify as F-grade units, but we're still willing to pay 10% of the grade A quoted value for those machines. And oftentimes I get the question, well, is it worth repairing my device before I trade it in? And it really depends on the age of your device and what your repair cost is going to be. And then that's something that we can help you with in determining whether it makes most sense in terms of your costs to have it repaired or not.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have another question in here. How does my school district choose a trade-up partner to get the most value for my devices?
So one thing I would recommend is ask for references. References are very, very telling, and make sure that you understand that the company that you're working with can pay you in the end. We've seen a number of instances where school districts have chosen a trade-up partner that they thought was a partner, but in fact took their devices, ended up selling them, took that money instead of paying the school district, filed bankruptcy, and then didn't ever pay the school district. And it required the school district to move into litigation and a lawsuit, which is never fun for anybody. So you really want to make sure that they have quality references, they've got a quality reputation within the industry and within the company that you're purchasing your new devices from.
Great, thank you. Looks like another question. Do you have any tips on how to help schools see education technology as an operational expense, if I anticipate that being a hard thing to do?
Yeah, that's a really good one too. When you factor in the concept of operational expenses, the key question that you have to ask on the front end of that is, could my students and staff operate without these devices in hand on a day-to-day basis? And if the answer is no, they could not do this, then you've created an environment that really depends on having iPads and Macs on hand for students. And so By removing those, that would impact the learning environment dramatically and the experience that you really want for your students and your staff. So again, if the answer is no to that, then you really need to determine how you want to pay for that equipment over time. And the most predictable, cost-effective way is to have that yearly payment, either over that 3-year or that 4-year term.
Great. It looks like we have another question here, which we hear a lot, which is, what can I do with iPad 2s?
That's a great question. iPad 2s, having been introduced in 2011, are now a 7-year-old device. And oftentimes people think there really isn't any value in those, and there's still significant value given their age and what their initial price point was. So for additional questions on iPad 2 pricing, I'm happy to provide a quote for anyone who's interested.
Great. If anyone else has additional questions, feel free to enter them into the chat. We'll take just a couple more. Here it looks like we have a question around process. So what's the first thing I need to do if I want to refresh my technology?
First of all, you want to identify what the new devices are that you're moving into. And so with the latest release of the iPad 6th generation from Apple, we're seeing most districts move in that direction because, first of all, the price point and also the great experience that it provides for students and for staff. So once you've identified what equipment you're going to move forward with, the next step would be to reach out to me or to any one of us at Diamond Assets to get your initial quote based on the inventory. Now, in order to provide an accurate quote, there's certain things that we look for. And when it comes to iPads, we're looking for the iPad type. So if that was an iPad 2, as an example, and then the storage configuration associated with that. So if all of your units were iPad 2, 16 gigs of storage, then we could, and the other thing we need is the quantity associated with that to quote it accurately. When it comes to the Mac, we need a sample serial number and the quantity associated with that so that we can quote it as accurately as possible.
Looks like we have another question here about first-generation iPads.
And unfortunately, there's not any value left in the first-gen iPads. Up until about 8 months ago, there was about $25 of value left in those, but the secondary market is no longer supporting the purchase of those. So thank you for that question, though.
And it looks like we have one more question on what types of devices do you refresh besides iPad?
So that's a very good question. What we found at Diamond Assets is that we work with Apple products really, really well. And in order to remain, really focused and keep our process simplified, it's critical to us that, we work solely with Apple products.
Great. And then, so you work with MacBooks and...
We do. Okay. We work with MacBooks. We work with iPads. Essentially anything with an Apple logo on the hardware, with a few exceptions. So when it comes, we had a question that just came in, and that question is there a big difference in payment we can get between e-waste and trading in? So the simple answer is yes. When it comes to e-waste, typically, you're getting roughly 20 cents per pound for that e-wasted material. I've seen instances where districts are actually paying recycling companies to come in and clear out that e-waste material, and seeing very, very little return, if any, when in fact they do get paid for those pounds of devices that come in. When it comes to trading in, because of the residual value that exists in Apple products, there's tremendous value to be taken advantage of in terms of you as a school district to make sure that you can apply that to your next acquisition of Apple hardware.
Great. And it looks like we have one more question, which is, do you sell devices back to school districts?
That's an interesting question also. We draw a line in the sand when it comes to selling back into school districts. As an educator myself, it's really critical that I don't enable anyone to have a second-rate experience. And so it's our belief as a company that taking care of that experience for students and staff by not selling secondary or secondhand equipment back into those environments, we have a strong belief as a company that that's not the right thing to do. And when you get on a predictable cycle of what your costs are going to be by trading in at the right time, it really brings down your costs significantly on new product. So as a point of reference, if you take a look at the price point of the iPad 6th Gen and 10-pack pricing at $294, we're forecasting that in 3 years that's going to be worth $100 at grade A pricing. So by doing simple math, your total cost at that point is $194 for that device, which is significantly more competitive than anything else that's out there on the market. So I would really encourage anyone who's listening, and please feel free to share this, that you need to factor in the entire story, not just the initial acquisition cost that's associated with the machine.
This is great. Well, thank you so much, Charles, for joining us today, and thank you to all of our participants and those who submitted questions. We recorded this webinar, and we will post it on jamf.com in the coming days. Thank you, and have a great rest of your week.